I'll call it to order. And so we'll move on down to section 2 will be changes to the agenda and approval of the agenda. No recognitions, no visitors. We do have one administrative personnel appointment of Assistant Principal 1, Niceville High School. Public comment, section 6. Members of the public desiring to address the school board, Form MIS 5241, public input and/or discussion. Of course, we never know until the night of a meeting if we have those folks that will be joining us. And so we're down to section 7, committee and staff reports. 7.1, Northwest Florida State College Collegiate High School, a charter school and restricted fund of Northwest Florida State College, financial statements and supplemental information for the year ended June 30th, 2020 and 2019. And 7.2 is in-county travel paid for the period of December 10th, 2020 through January 6th, 2021. Now we're down to section 8, consent agenda. And school board members, just stop me at any time if there's a question that you might have for staff or the superintendent. 8.1 will be the approval of the consent agenda. 8.2, approval of the minutes of this.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Are you okay? Okay.
No, it's just there's a correction that needs to be made, so.
Okay. Approval of the minutes of the student disciplinary hearings of January 7th, 2021, minutes of workshop meeting of January 7th, 2021, minutes of regular meeting of January 11th, 2021. Go ahead.
To the correction. Okay, yes. On the regular meeting, January the 11th, it mentions that Mr. Dewey Destin was in attendance, where it says members present.
Okay.
So that needs to be. Okay,
All right.
thank you.
And thank you, Ms. Gardner, for pointing that out. 8.3, appropriation of District 2 School Board member capital outlay funds to Elliott Point Elementary School for painting of portable buildings and safety rails on the bus ramp in the amount of $9,446, presented by Ms. Marty Gardner. And 8.4, request to advertise a public hearing for adoption of revised School Board Policy 04-34 equity policy for students, and this will be presented by Dr. Lee Hale.
Mr. Chairman, if I might,
Yes.
this item and the next 2 agenda items, these are all amendments to current board policies that will be made necessary if you adopt the new Title IX sexual harassment reporting policy at the public hearing at this board meeting. So these are on here just to authorize us to advertise those changes, subject to you approving that other policy, and that will bring them all in line. Basically, it takes sexual harassment reporting and investigation out of these 3 policies and refers it over to the new policy that's in line with the federal regulation.
Okay.
And any confirmed reports of such is still required to be reported to the school board. Is that correct?
We're
Our
not
previous-
taking anything out of that.
Right.
And out of those
Right,
policies.
right. Our previous policy was that should there be a confirmed report of sexual harassment involving employees, that would be reported to the school board. And I just wanted to make sure that everyone knows that's still the case.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you, Dr. White. Okay, so we'll move down to 8.5, request to advertise a public hearing for adoption of revised School Board Policy 06-27, equity policy prohibiting harassment on the basis of race, color, national or ethnic origin, sex, age, religious beliefs, marital status, pregnancy, or disability. 8.6, request to advertise a public hearing for adoption of revised School Board Policy 06-28, reporting violations of equity policies prohibiting discrimination and harassment. And 8.7, budget amendment number 4, fiscal year 2020 through 2021. 8.8, monthly financial statement for December 2020. 8.9, invoices to be approved for payment. 8.10, school donations. 8.11, payroll warrant register and accounts payable warrant register for December 2020, totaling $37,233,994.39, and bank transfers for November through December 2020, totaling $22,968,270.60. 8.12, authorization to advertise an amended notice of tax for school capital outlay for fiscal year 2020 through 2021. 8.13, revised fiscal year 2020 through 2021 child care fees. 8.14, Resolution 21-01, a resolution of the School Board of Okaloosa County, Florida, establishing a sales surtax tax Citizens Oversight Committee. That was a mouthful. So, Mr. Chambers, would you like to comment on this?
Thank you, sir. I would like to take this opportunity just to give a little bit of information about the Citizens Oversight Committee. And then after that, Mr. McGinnis, I know we have a resolution as well. If you would also maybe point out some of the key points of the resolution. But I do want to just first of all thank once again the voters of Okaloosa County for their trust in us to do a very good job with this half-cent sales tax funds. And also would like to thank the Chambers of Commerces throughout Okaloosa County for their work in helping this pass. As you know, part of the promise that we made throughout the process was that we would have a Citizens Oversight Group. And we thought that that was an integral part of transparency in terms of what we were trying to accomplish. And we have come up with a Citizens Oversight Committee. It's comprised of 9 members, and I'm going to share the names of those individuals. We will also, in the days to come, have a bio for each of you on each of these members. So the first member is Michelle Ankers, or would be, with your approval, would be Michelle Ankers, the founding partner of Ankers Gordon Law Firm. Monica Autry, she's an operations manager at Destin Water Users Incorporated. Jason Belcher, executive vice president, FNBT Bank. Mike Carroll, owner, Hub City Smokehouse and Barbecue Grill in Crestview. Jacob Foreman, sales associate, Caldwell Banker Realty. Bernard Johnson, Central District Regional Manager, Gulf Power Company. Vince Mayfield, CEO and co-founder of BitWizards Information Technology Solutions Incorporated. James Puckett, retired Okaloosa County Facility and Parks Maintenance Manager. And Marcus Wilson, Lieutenant Colonel, United States Air Force. And each of these members, they're comprised of individuals throughout Okaloosa County, from Baker to Crestview, Niceville, Fort Walton, Destin, and also comprised of different backgrounds and experiences and expertise. Each member would serve for 1 year in terms of a term, and they would be appointed. The committee will be in existence for the life of the half-cent sales tax, which would be for 10 years. All meetings, records, and reports of the committee will be open to the public.
And Superintendent, I just would ask a question, and Mr. McInnes, I think probably this comes your way. So when we say that open records, would you spend just a moment, Mr. McInnes, talking about that, what that really means?
Yes, sir. The work of the committee will be subject to the Sunshine Law and the Public Records Law. And so what that means is that we will be publicly advertising their meetings. Their meetings will be open to the public so the public can attend their meetings. Minutes of those meetings will be kept and maintained. The Public Records Law will mean that the records and documents that are presented to that committee and that are generated by that committee will be public records, and the district will be maintaining those items.
And might that also mean any private communications between the members that pertain to the business of the committee?
Yes, that we're going to brief the committee members on the Sunshine Law and its implications for them, and we know that includes communications of any form, and they will all be briefed on those requirements.
Very good, because that's the big thing that in my mind, I'm so grateful to citizens in particular that are willing to step forward, and I know the board is too, but that in a committee like this, I just think it's so important that we spend the time, and I know you will, and I appreciate you saying that, to inform them of some of the detriments, if you will, in terms of public service regarding private communications.
Yes,
and so I know you'll do that, and I'm very grateful. And I didn't mean to interrupt you, Superintendent, but it's just my opinion and some experiences that we've all had that's really important for them to know. The best practice is just don't do it.
Right, and in fairness to the members, once you appoint them, we will brief them on that in our first meeting, because that's not something that
Right.
citizens are used to
No,
having
sir.
to comply with, and now they
Exactly.
will on this committee.
Exactly. Thank you, sir. All right, thank you, Superintendent.
Thank you, Dr. White, and I think that's an important clarification. Also, this committee, one of the functions that they will do is they'll review expenditures of the proceeds, make sure that it's what we do and what we spend and what we're working on is in accordance with the projects that we set forth at the beginning. Also, this committee will make quarterly reports to the school board as well as to the public, and making sure that we are very transparent in our process. And then lastly, Mr. Horton will coordinate the initial meeting that will begin in February with your approval of this group, as well as Mr. McGinnis and Ms. Scallon being a part of that meeting, just to make sure that it's very organized, questions can be answered, and we can start off on the right foot. And with that, Mr. McGinnis, if you'd like to give any other information that is pertinent.
Thank you, Superintendent. The board members, as you've seen the resolution, the superintendent has basically outlined the material parts of that resolution. The committee is to be appointed by the school board with input from area chambers of commerce. And you see that the committee membership and the composition of the committee is laid out in your resolution, giving guidance as to who the members should be representing what areas or things like that. And then, as we've said, the committee will be subject to the Sunshine Law, the Public Records Law, and their role will be to review the projects and expenditures of the sales tax, and just to give update reports to the board and to the public on that review.
All right, thank you. Anything else, Mr. Chambers?
That is it on that item.
All right, thank you, sir. So we'll move down to item 8.15, emergency purchase, Edgenuity. 8.16, tag on bid, annual agreement for portable moving services. 8.17, ITB 21-06, internet services. 8.18, ITB 21-05, telecommunication services for wide area network. 8.19, Apple iPad 3-year lease.
And Mr. Bryant?
Yes, sir.
If you wouldn't mind, I'd like Mr. Horton to come up and just give a little bit of information on this topic. This is an exciting topic and a very important topic, especially at the elementary level.
Thanks, Mr. Chambers, board members. So we are proposing to work with Apple right now on an iPad lease that will allow us at the elementary level to get to one-to-one with devices. And we've talked about this prior, but K2 would be iPad, 1-to-1, and 3-5 is already in the process of 1-to-1 Chromebook, and that's happening in elementary schools right now. We have crossed over a threshold. COVID kind of forced it upon us, but we've crossed over a threshold that I don't think we'll ever return from, and that is the intricate connection between student learning and these devices right now. And so we've had all of these students experience it, whether they were My School Online or not. The first thought of this back in the summer was we would go down this particular avenue, not knowing what the future holds in terms of students having to go home during the fall. Of course, that didn't happen. Thankfully, it didn't happen, in my opinion, but I still think that it is an environment now that is so rich in the technology pieces that to have the ability for each student to have a device is critical. Of course, the funding piece of it is always the question mark of it. This particular lease is strong for the district, in my opinion, because it is essentially a 0% lease. There are no finance charges associated with it. So what we do typically, and we do this as a district now, is we purchase iPads. They are not part of our seat management process with Teleforce. We purchase iPads and we support them ourselves through our IT department with Bill Hagan, who does a yeoman's effort in keeping thousands of iPads up and running with apps. And he's got assistance from a technician as well, Brian Walton. So we are purchasing iPads repeatedly and over time and replacing them as we currently exist in the district. But this 4,600 iPads will allow us to get to one-to-one throughout. And Ms. Scallon looked at this particular lease option that delivers these iPads to us in the month of April, I believe, and hopefully March, but also does not provide us with a first-year payment until July 15, which is not in this particular budget cycle. So as to questions of did we have to kind of rearrange the capital budget for this specific purchase for this school year, the answer is no. What we're doing is prioritizing it going forward. And I think, in all honesty, the sales surtax piece is kind of a corollary to this, because what it's allowing us to do with those proceeds is giving us, and we know this, it gives us some of the flexibility in our capital outlay budget to do things like this that are critical. So that's the good news, not having to adjust the current capital year budget. And then going forward, we actually have two options under this lease agreement. We typically are on a 3-year refresh cycle with our devices, because after 3 years, sometimes they just don't work as well as they should. Technology kind of laps them. At the end of year 3 of this process, we have the ability to either continue on and use these devices for a 4th year, or arrange for a purchase of them and cover that 4th year payment and then begin again. So there's flexibility on the tail end of this that allows us to make a decision after year 3 about what we want to do. The amount that you see on there is a cost that will be broken out over years, and then we'll make sure that it's budgeted in the capital budget. One of the other things that is, I don't want it to get too far into the weeds, but at the secondary level, we have lots of student laptops in our buildings right now, but we have determined that by and large, in almost every case, the Chromebook functions and does what it needs to for student learning, and as opposed to a laptop. And so as we refresh our devices at the secondary level, you're going to see fewer and fewer student laptops, which, if you've seen them, they're small, they're about the size of Chromebooks, but they're more expensive to seat manage. And so as we rotate out student laptops for student Chromebooks in the coming years, there'll be savings that we'll realize from that will, in a total model, allow us to be able to absorb the cost of these iPads at the elementary level. And I would expect that the next question is, are we going to be doing this at the middle and high school levels at some point down the road? And I'm going to push to make that happen and see if we can make sure that's a gradual approach to making that happen.
To do iPads?
No, I think at the secondary level, we would stick with Chromebooks. And so we're creating a one-to-one environment in our elementary schools right now. The secondary schools do have lots and lots of devices right now, but they're not one-to-one. And so, we'll study that model this spring and start to look at what that would look like as a rollout over the coming years.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think, well, go ahead.
I was just going to say I appreciated the conversation with Eric yesterday, that because I asked about, well, what about the carts and the charging stations and all of that, and I know that is in the works and is coming, but it's not part of this deal.
That's right.
And neither is training, which I would think to be an important component anytime you buy new software and new equipment, but I know that those are being worked on too. So just a note of thanks
Yes,
to
ma'am.
understand that those accoutrements that are so important to this purchase are also in the works.
Yes.
Ms. Gardner?
Well,
Or Ms. Van Check, I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry. I'm just glad we're seeing some iPads, because I was talking with Mr. Mitchell, and we've worked together when I was back in the classroom. I got some of the first Macs because I was doing desktop publishing with publications. So I go back to like 1990 when I had a little Mac like that.
Square box.
And so it was, I was definitely an outsider when it came to the Macs, because there was like Macs. In fact, we didn't have anybody to work on them. And then finally, in my last few years, when we needed to replace our Macs, I was told you can't have Macs. And Mr. Mitchell helped me with that, because we got Macs, because we had to do our school newspaper on it. So I'm excited to see Macs, because the world has now come around to all of us Mac people and has caught on that it is a Mac world. So I'm excited to see this. I would be for it in the high school level, but I just think that these students are really, this is where technology is in the world. And also because my concern was, back when I had Macs, we really didn't have, we had a couple people who would come and help me troubleshoot when I had a problem with my Mac, because most of the people were PCs, and they'd come in and go, oh, you got a Mac, so I don't know about that. So I asked him about that. Are there going to be people who can come in and work on those? We got it, Ms. Ivanchek. We have moved along on the technology part and for people coming in. So he assured me of that, which I was glad, because
Yes, ma'am.
sometimes things go wrong.
Yes, ma'am, and I won't paint this as a one-size-fits-all, so there obviously are career technical programs in our schools, some of the IT pieces where an Apple product, an Apple computer, a Mac is the appropriate for what they're doing, and so
Right.
those will always have a place
Yep.
in those particular settings.
Right.
And I'm also excited, thrilled to see this in the elementary, the one-on-one, and I think our teachers are also. Thinking about again, K through 2, it's wonderful. What about screens breaking, cases? That's a lot of new instruments. So who would be repairing?
Yes, ma'am.
That's kind of a tag-along too.
Right.
Yeah, we have a lot of data, Bill Hagan has a lot of data on Apple repair.
Okay.
And believe it or not, these devices, and they're coming cased, which is
Oh,
a big thing,
wonderful.
because having to case 4,600 devices and also install our operating system on them, that we're actually, that's part of the lease, so they're coming to us ready to deploy.
Principals will love that they're coming cased and they don't
Yes.
have that expense.
Yes, and so we
wonderful.
actually have a very low breakage rate
Okay.
on iPads. So we'll continue to monitor that, but obviously, we've got to have the ability to, what we call hot swap. You know, at the elementary level, if a kid's got to have a device that day, there could be an extra set of devices there that the administrator at the school has access to if they need to hot swap. So we will be monitoring that, but I don't think,
Wonderful.
our experience with iPads in cases have been pretty good.
Good, great job.
Unless we issue them out to families and homes over the summer, then things.
Well, I know the teachers will be eagerly
Yep,
waiting.
that's a whole nother
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah.
We're not gonna even talk about that, so.
Whole nother
And-
Great
and-
job.
And having had some experience with this in the past that Board Member Evanchek spoke to a moment ago, could you speak to, just for a minute, about two things, really? First of all, it's more mundane, and that would be, is there any kind of maintenance service contract provided by Apple with this purchase, or is the repair and maintenance on the school district? And then the second part would be, I think the public might appreciate knowing about any kind of security measures that we've taken as a school district to protect our students. I mean, we could start with the fact that every student will be required to follow the acceptable use policy. But then anything that we've done on our end, hardware specific, to make sure that we've done all we can to protect our precious cargo and where they might venture with
Yes,
such a
sir.
device.
Yes, sir. So to your second question first, we're one of, and Eric's much more knowledgeable on that than I, and I'll have him contact the board members, but we have firewall security in our school district that would rival any district in the state. I think that there are a number of, there are many districts that we've talked to that marvel at the kind of firewall security that we have in our school district. And sometimes that's frustrating because you can't get to where you want to get, but it is an important component for students and education. And the beautiful thing is, when we issue a Chromebook to a student and they take it home and they log into that device, we still have control over that device and what it has access to.
Even if they're on their own
Yes, sir.
Wi-Fi
Yes,
network
sir.
in their own home?
Yes, sir.
Or at the public library or wherever it might be?
Yes, sir.
Excellent.
So that's a strong piece to it. Now, with the one-to-one project right now, we're not contemplating at this point having the elementary students initially take those devices home.
All right,
But I think at some point we'll work toward that, and possibly not having that happen at K-1, but maybe as we move to. So in the initial piece, those devices will stay at school, they'll stay on our OCSD network, and we'll get everybody trained and accustomed. But at some point in the future, I would expect that devices will be coming to and from. And at some point in the future, textbooks, whether they continue to be bound in multiple pages, or they all are on our books, because they're on our devices now. Students have access to all those electronic textbooks, and so those security pieces are in place. In the first question that you asked about
Maintenance.
the maintenance piece of it. So this agreement does not cover maintenance on these devices, but again, our experience on them has been very good in terms of those costs. And then if it is appropriate for us to set aside a small amount in our budget for maintenance in the upcoming budget cycle, we'll do that and bring that to the board.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
And Mr. Bryant, one thing
Yes,
I
sir.
want to add, and Mr. Horton's absolutely correct, that right now, these devices, in terms of the one-to-one, the purpose is for it to be at the school site. However, as early as even this upcoming Friday, I'll be part of a meeting with a group of superintendents that will be talking about various topics. So I just received this information, but one of the topics will also be making sure that school districts are prepared for next school year if in fact this current model were to still be in place at some level. So that is something that we definitely need to be prepared for, and we will. As we know, devices are critical in this in the current model that we have. So us going to one-to-one at the elementary school and then starting a process of exploring, of expanding at some point at the secondary level is important. You know, what have we learned from this online model that could become somewhat of a norm in the future across the state or across the country? So we have to be prepared for that. We will be looking at lessons learned from our school district and lessons learned from other school districts of how we can do things even better, but I think that's an important point as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chambers. Okay, so we will move down to section 8.20, application to the state of Florida for a safety and security of school buildings, school hardening grant. 8.21, school food service 2020 NSLP equipment grant assistance application. 8.22, contract agreement between the School Board of Okaloosa County and Northwest Florida State College for the 2021-2022 school year, acknowledging the Collegiate High School Program 2021 through 2022. And finally, 8.23, the Okaloosa County School District 2021 through 2022 and 2022 through 2023 school calendars. And Mr. Chambers, would you like to?
I do want to say, have Mr. Horton or Ms. Ross come forward, but I want to thank Ms. Dushka Ross and the work that she did with the committee. As you know, going through a school calendar, especially a 2-year calendar, is important so families know what to expect. But a good job working with the committee comprised of administrators, teachers, and so forth. But Ms. Ross, if you'd give some extra information.
Good morning, sir, and good morning to each of you. Thank you for a moment to speak with you regarding these calendar developments. So it's always a pleasure to meet with our stakeholders, our district administrators, our parents in the community to help develop something that they're going to use as a guide for the future. And so it's been a different year in that Mr. Horton had the opportunity to take care of a lot of the hard work in December. And so my interaction with them was brief, and it was highly functional and well coordinated, and I can't speak highly enough about your administrators and your parents. They were outstanding and deliberative, and I think we've arrived at 2 calendars that I'm hoping you will see as very positive maps for the future. As always, we look towards starting dates, we look towards those holidays, we look towards appropriate breaks, we look towards pacing, we try and take into account the assessment schedules coming out, knowing that many of these things have the flexibility of future thought, but knowing that they can be moved at times. But I think we've arrived at calendars that are predictive, and they're very formative, and the community supports fully. So. Once again, thank you very much for the opportunity, and it was a pleasure to work with your committees.
Thank you for doing this and the committee, because I can tell you one thing. I think all of us have been involved here for a long time know that you start messing with the calendar, people get all excited, and there is never one calendar that everyone's going to agree on. And so, I mean, I'm just looking at those, and we have to work around a lot of different things, like you said. And like I used to tell people, all the time when they complain, you can't start late and get out early too. I mean, there are laws we have to keep. They want to come in, they don't want to come. I keep hearing the old Labor Day thing, which, we haven't done that in decades. I don't know, they must be as old as I am or something. But we can't do that and then get out before Christmas and all those things. So, we just have to work around it. And I think this is great, and I'm glad to see that input from people in the community, because again, we don't want people to think we're just setting this up for what's best for us and the district. We're looking at what's best for students and others, and And even our community being a military-based community, we
Yes,
look at
ma'am.
those Monday holidays, all those kinds of things that we have. And so I know it's an arduous task to get this done, so thank you and the committee.
Absolutely, it was a pleasure. And speaking to something you mentioned, all of my conversations with parents regarding the calendar, they so often revolve around, I really want to make sure that what I schedule does not conflict with the intent of educational pacing. And I want to make sure that I can predict for as many years as possible where we need to be and when we need to be there, and take into account movement like military flight and all of those good deals. I neglected to mention the participation of Ms. Appleberg and her folks. They're dynamic and they're flexible, and I appreciate them so much. So, thank you.
And Ms. Ross, if you'd wait there 1 second, if you just permit me.
Yes.
So you know that this year, as it pertains to brick and mortar, as it pertains to My School Online, all the changes that have been made, we make sure that we praise our teachers, we praise our support staff and our administrators, and rightfully so. And we've talked about some of the behind-the-scenes folks who make all this work. Ms. Ross, Mr. McSween, Eric Mitchell, and I'm sure there's folks that I'm missing on the MIS side. And then to the curriculum side, there's that connection is absolutely important. So what Ms. Ross and her team, what they've done this year, what curriculum has done this year in the conversations with Ms. Ross and others has been a monumental task and a way of doing business that is completely different, whether it's scheduling, whether it's making sure things get to the right spot electronically, that I can't talk competently enough about. But what you all have done this year, the amount of time and energy and hours that you all have put in this year is fantastic. And to coordinate across two departments that don't necessarily speak the same language, but they're pieces that have to speak the same language, has made me extremely proud. It hasn't been easy. And I know it's been frustrating at times, but what you all have done, and then the work of the curriculum folks have done as well, is amazing.
I'd like to say thank you. Years ago, I stood and said that I worked with the best people in the state, and I stand by that fully. I work with the best people in the state, sir. So thank you very much for your leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you know, Mr. Chambers, I don't know of too many school districts that actually put out a 2-year calendar. Sometimes they are making decisions right up close, before the next school, during the summer and all that. So I think it's a testament to our school district that for the last 4 to 6 years, we put out a 2-year calendar, so people can get an idea of what's happening and all that, so.
Absolutely.
All right, so we'll move down to section 9 and superintendent's human resource recommendations. And the first two will be informational only on Monday night's meeting. So 9.1 is employees on administrative leave. 9.2, the deferred retirement option program, the drop. And we'll move down to 9.3, cleared certification requirements and issuance of contracts for the 2020-2021 school year. 9.4, add a field report for the 2020-2021 school year. 9.5, employment separations. 9.6, personnel recommendations. 9.7, employee reassignment. 9.8, employee transfers. 9.9, employee termination. 9.10, reinstatement, reimbursement of sick leave due to line of duty, illness, injury, medical examination. And finally, 9.11, leave without pay.
Can I go back to 9.10, please, and ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
This has been a standard procedure we've had in our district, but with the COVID situation and the fact that we aren't charging employees, how does this stand with this? Is this other than COVID, or does this correlate with those that have to be out for COVID?
This does not have anything to do with COVID. This is a standard,
Okay, the standard
workman's comp,
okay.
reimbursement,
For other situations?
payback types of situations. This is not COVID related.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Vancheck. Okay, so section 10 will be discussion agenda. As of right now, there's nothing been moved from the consent agenda. And so we'll move down to section 11, and Dr. Kelly.
Nothing new to report, other than excited to be working with the new Citizens Oversight Committee. I know every person on there except one name, and I'm looking forward to meeting that individual too. So a great committee. Looking forward to that. Thank you.
Okay, and 11.2 will be program number 6, task order number 2, phase 2, school security projects for various school sites. And we have nothing under section 12, information technology seat management. And Mr. McInnes, we are to your business, sir.
I want to go back and clarify my comments to Dr. White when he asked about this new policy. The current provision for reporting to the board confirmed equity policy violations is under 0628. We have not taken that out in these proposed amendments. The new policy that deals with the Title IX equity reporting has included in it the mandatory child abuse reporting language that we put in other policies. It requires a notification to parents if the complainant is under the age of 18 on the front end of that procedure. We will carry over a report to the board. We're developing a procedures manual that will go with this policy. So we will ensure that that is put into that procedures manual, a confirmed case, because under the new Title IX federal regulations, it's a very lengthy process to get to the end of these cases.
Right.
But we will include in the procedures manual a reporting of information to the board if we do have a final non-appealable confirmed case.
And when you say procedures manual, of course, I think I understand what that is, but for the public's information, that would be something that the superintendent would administer through his staff.
That's correct.
And that would include principals, particularly, in informing them of the procedures to follow in regards to this. Is that right?
And that reporting of information to the board comes up through the superintendent's
Right.
level, so that's who would be doing that
I understand
informing of
that.
you, and the superintendent will be administering that procedures manual.
But the manual itself will be something that will be disseminated for
To
folks.
those parties that need to use it, yes, because it's
Yes.
going to be procedurally, in the new Title IX process, there are a number of designated, there's investigative levels, fact-finding levels, decision-maker levels, appeals decision-making levels, and different individuals designated by the superintendent to do all those things.
Okay.
And that process will be, they all have to be trained, and that's part of your policy, they will all be trained.
All right, very good.
Yes,
Very
sir.
good. Thank you, sir.
That's all I have.
Mr. McInnes, I do have one question, and we talked a little bit about this at the agenda meeting, but at our last board meeting, we did have a personnel appointment, and we did not mention that person's name in our meeting.
And that's being addressed under section 9.7.
Okay, did I miss that?
That's that reappointment for the grant
Okay.
program, and this is asking the board just to ratify that individual to clear up that matter.
Okay,
By name.
thank you.
By name.
By name.
Right.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I actually missed that one, so, okay, well, good, that's good to know. Just so people know, we did not mention that person's name at our last meeting when we approved the position, so, all right. So we will move to Mr. Chambers' business. The first one is out-of-state school student trip request, and then any business that you'd like to go over, sir.
Yes, sir. So a few items. So one, as you know, we talked about this being School Board Appreciation Month. And what you all do on a daily basis, I think is a testament to this school district in terms of the value that you bring, the decisions that you make, and you all being very active in our schools. And I wanted to take it just a little step further. And I reached out to a few of our principals, and so they've have some words for you all. So I'm just going to read some of those words to you. And Mr. Bryant from Principal Dexter Day, he says, "I'd like to give a shout out to my school board member, Mr. Tim Bryant, for School Board Appreciation Month. Mr. Bryant is always there to support our students and staff while balancing support for all of his schools. He is quick to recognize those with special recognition and supporting us during the challenges our school faces. Mr. Bryant not only serves Crestview High School and all Crestview area schools, but he's also a school board member to all of Okaloosa. I could not ask for more from Tim. Once a Bulldog, always a Bulldog." He talked about all across the district and then straight back to Crestview High School. But
Well, he was principal of the year. wasn't
that's
he?
right, that's right. So warm words from Principal Day.
Thank you.
Dr. Kelly, from Principal Amy Clue at Blue Water Elementary. And Dr. Kelly is a kind, caring person who demonstrates her genuine concern for the mission of your school by calling to check on you, volunteering to proctor for testing, and even coming by with a gift basket to use for morale-boosting raffles. She is the definition of a servant leader, and her presence at Blue Water and in our schools as a whole is appreciated. So thank you for what you do. Dr. White, this is from Principal Tracy Lamb at Meggs. Of course, you're very familiar with Meggs. The Meggs family appreciates Dr. White for his unfailing commitment to our school, staff, students, and community. From taking time to visit our campus and check on the progress of our new office complex and single point of entry, to funding projects such as new flooring and classroom equipment, Dr. White supports our mission to continually improve the Meggs experience for our students. Our district is without a doubt blessed to have a board member with Dr. White's experience and wisdom, and our schools are forever grateful for his support. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Gardner? And this is from Principal Gwyn Morris over at Edwin's. Marty Gardner is someone I've always admired and looked up to. She supported Edwin's and me many years ago before I became the principal. She always is there, ready to listen to my concerns and give me words of encouragement. She always told me that she had a special place in her heart for our school, and with those words, we had common ground. Thank you, Marty, for your support. Your experience and genuine nature will be an asset to the entire school district. Ms. Ivanchek, and this is from Principal Mike Martello. Since taking office, Ms. Ivanchek has been a relentless champion of Baker School. From academics to athletics to the arts, she has always been there to support every aspect of our K-12 community school. She has gone so far as to personally invest in the recognition of teachers and staff, as well as our Title I program. Our sincerest appreciation to Ms. Linda Ivanchek for being an integral member of the Baker Gator family.
Go Gators.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And then I have one last one, and this is from Principal Grant Meyer to all school board members. He said, I would like to thank our school board members for all they do for our students and schools. You play a vital role in our efforts to improve education. I'm grateful for everything you do in making our district even greater. I have worked with each member in some capacity, and I can always count on your support. One member, Dr. White, goes way back, instilling valuable lessons in me that I still carry throughout my life. Thank you, Dr. White, Ms. Gardner, Ms. Ivanchek, Mr. Bryant, and Dr. Kelly. Your time and energy helps ensure our students, current and future, have every opportunity to learn and grow. And I think having genuine words from our principals, and we could go to teachers, to support professionals, to our district staff, to our senior staff, what you all do for our school district. It's, sometimes you don't necessarily hear all the praise, but what you do is important and it's vital in terms of us continue to move forward. So thank you all for everything that you do.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
That means a lot.
Thank you, Superintendent.
At this time, I want to transition to a COVID update. And Mr. Horton, if you'd make your way up while I say a couple things. As you know, there are some school districts across the state of Florida who have a COVID dashboard, some who do not necessarily. But we knew that we wanted to be very transparent with this information. We've worked hard to have a good relationship with our local health department. We've also expanded that to the state level as well. I shared with you all, I believe, last meeting that we have a newsletter that goes out monthly, and we've now changed it to our marketing, so to speak, to catch the wave and try to have a little bit more of a pizzazz to it. In there's always a COVID update as well. This spreadsheet right here that Mr. Horton is going to kind of highlight gives information on positive cases by school, and then overall by elementary, middle school, high school, and then our combination schools, and then all schools. And we'll make sure that you continue to get this as well. To the best of our ability, he is updating that weekly from the state site. So I think it's important that As we know, COVID is a serious topic. We take it very serious here as a school district to do everything that we can do with our safety measures as well. But I think the data is also something that we should all be aware of.
And so, as Mr. Chambers said, we've updated the school webpage with this recent information through the 16th, taken from the state Florida Department of Health website, and they've got every school in the state listed up there. And so, as a reminder, of course, our enrollment, it changes every day, our overall enrollment. So we're using enrollment that we pulled on the 6th of January, and I'll review that again as we get further along, see if it needs to be adjusted. But that enrollment in our schools and the positive cases that are being reported. So now the website shows a cumulative total since September 6th, which is the first week that the state website became available, and it now also shows weekly totals for each school. So we've kind of created two different documents there. At current point, the bottom of this particular, at the end of the 16th, we had 2.6% of our student body had been identified as COVID positive at some time during the year. So 97.4% COVID free. So those numbers, of course, that percentage of those students who are COVID free will naturally go up as more cases are identified and the enrollment in the school district doesn't grow. So you'll see a creeping of that number until such time as we have no more COVID cases to report. But it's slow moving. And again, the vast overwhelming majority of our kids are still healthy and safe in our school settings. So that's important. On the employee level, so the column that the state puts out is kind of a catch-all. They've got teachers, they have staff, and they have an unknown category. And that could be itinerants that maybe is not assigned to a particular school or just don't have all the information on the state's unknown category. But we group that all together. And at this point in time, we've got 266 employees who have been identified as COVID positive, and our employee workforce is about 3,700 folks. So the math on that is about 93% of our employees have been COVID-free this year, and about 7% have had COVID at some point since the beginning of the school year. So those numbers, we'll continue to update those and kind of tell and share the story of that, and obviously continue to work closely with the health department on helping our students and staff be safe.
May I say something?
Yes.
Mr.
Oh, yes,
Bryant?
sir.
First of all, just to express my appreciation to you, your staff, and superintendent for the transparency that you are providing to the public regarding this critically important matter. I just think that's so important for us to do that, and just wanted to say how much I appreciate it that you're doing that. And at this very moment, in fact, this morning, I went to okaloosaschools.com and I looked at the dashboard report that you folks do, and I want the public to know that that's out there. They can look at it, they can see, and all the information that we have about that, we're putting it out there, and it is something that's very concerning, but thank you for doing that,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Horton, the superintendent.
So I just have one quick comment on that dashboard, the numbers that are reflected there. And I know we've mentioned this before, but that also includes online students, correct?
Yes, sir. If an online student's positive for
teachers.
COVID or teacher, they're identified as, because this state site
Right.
reports all school-age children.
Right, and I think sometimes what the public is looking at, that number is just reflective of the brick and mortar, when it's really a combination of online and brick and mortar, so.
I think Sheila's going to give you an update on semester and movement of students and how that's adjusting too. So we're planning for that.
Absolutely, and that's a good transition. And
All right, there you go.
that's the next topic. As you know, this is the end of the first semester this week. We'll be starting the second semester next week. All is not 100% clear yet in terms of who's coming back, because we have some students who will still be making that decision. We have some students who are going out to My School Online. So Ms. Lightbourne, if you come up and just kind of talk about some of the communications that we've done, some of the timelines, our process, and numbers that we have to date.
Sorry, I mask was caught on my ear. Okay, both earrings.
That was a graceful entrance, Ms.
Yeah,
Lightboard.
thank you so much.
You could have let it hang just on one side. Okay.
Yeah, hey, I might
We're used to
have
it.
made a new
Right.
item, right?
I know, we're used to it.
Matches your outfit so nicely, so.
Thanks.
Nice job.
Okay, so, I'm going to give you approximate numbers because, as Mr. Chambers said, as I talked to APs, we are having a lot of movement both ways. So, and I'll kind of give you a timeline of how we started. So, you know, when the executive order came out, we began contacting parents. We sent information in the newsletters, and we did a call out. Then each school contacted our students of concern and encouraged them, strongly encouraged them to come back to brick and mortar, that potentially the learning environment they were in was not necessarily the learning environment that they should be in. Most parents said, give us through Christmas and let us see where we are at that point. So then as soon as we came back, those administrators started making those calls again. So at this point, right now, we believe we have 1,044 students coming back to brick and mortar. So that's a pretty good amount. I talked to an AP yesterday, and she shared with me, yeah, but we have that many coming back, but yesterday, almost the entire baseball team came in to go out. So, you know, students are worried about quarantining and not being able to play their season, and of course, our spring sports didn't get to play last year, so they're very much wanting to do that. So we have that flexibility. The emergency order required us to keep that open. So, you know, we tried to hold at 9 weeks and then at semester for change, and unfortunately, we will not do that. It's to meet the needs of whatever the student needs at that time. So.
Okay, can I interrupt on that piece about the baseball team?
Mhm.
So you're telling me that at school, we have an entire baseball team who's decided to go?
Well, that was her words. I don't know if it was the entire team, but a good number of the players have decided to go online. Mhm.
But that's not being encouraged by,
I wouldn't think so.
So that
The
topic right
district.
there is definitely not being encouraged at a district level.
Okay.
It's not being encouraged at a principal level. First semester, I think that there were some football players or some athletes just in general who may have gone to my school online. And we all know quarantine is important for the safety of our students and staff. It's also frustrating for students, staff, and families at the same time, but safety is going to be first and foremost. I think that there are some who might be thinking that, you know, this is my senior year. I missed my junior year. I'm not going to miss my senior year. So in this model from the state level, families do have the ability to come and go. So that also adds some, just on the school side, that adds some frustration to master schedulers, to teachers who now are having kids come and go. So it is something that I think that is real, but it is something that is not encouraged.
And the coach level also.
I can't speak for any particular coach, but I would hope not.
Okay.
In first time I've heard of it, but my cursory thoughts are that, in retrospect, at this very moment, I'm not surprised. Because I think that our folks, parents, kids, are pretty smart.
Mhm.
And when there are opportunities, if you will, if that's the appropriate term, for flexibility that may accommodate them and their concerns and their needs, frankly, I'm not surprised. And if the state has created a model such that that's something that can occur, and certainly we're not encouraging it, then I guess that's just, as the superintendent said, a reality.
Absolutely.
All right.
And I do want to say on that administrator side, it is a challenge, as
Oh,
you
I can
see, when we
imagine.
have
Yeah.
1,044 coming back.
Right.
So they're trying to get those back, teachers back to meet the needs now in the brick and mortar, but then you have kids going
Sure.
out. And it's very difficult to predict that. So we're in flux a good amount of the time, so.
Wow.
Thank you, Ms. Lightboard. Mr. Chambers?
And that's all I have, sir.
All right. So now we'll move down to section 15, board members' announcements, requests for our information. And Dr. White, I'll start with you today, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Bryant. I just have a couple of quick things. From the website this morning, I would like, again, to point out to the public a couple of things that I believe the information I have is that we are in the controlled open enrollment window. So the parents that are requesting a different school perhaps for their child, this is the time when that should occur. And that window closes, I believe, if I saw correctly, February 15th. And so parents, I just wanted to make sure that you know that this is the time, that if you're going to file that paperwork, it's time to do it. Mr. Horton, if you have any comments about that? If it's all right with you,
Yes, sir.
Superintendent?
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. And that window is particularly important in schools that have a limited number of seats, because that will then result in a possibility of a lottery process. In schools that have a significant number of seats, we will, after the February 15th, kind of resync to see if there's any spots available. Those schools that still have available seats, parents will be able to apply for those seats throughout the spring and summer, because we do know we've got lots of military coming in. But you're right, Dr. White, for any school that's got a limited number of seats, that window, it's critical that parents apply during that January, February window.
Does that include kindergarten?
It does.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, we've pointed it out.
Yes, sir.
All right, a couple other things very quickly. I also appreciate the fact that on the website, the public and folks can go out and take a look at the half-cent sales tax projects that have been approved. And they're right there, they're listed. And again, our effort to be as transparent as possible on just about everything we do, I think. I'd like to express my regret for not being able to be here on the evening that we recognize the principals of the year. I think I've shared with the board and community that I had a couple of close contacts that were positive, and therefore I was doing my quarantine thing, and frankly, they're okay, but you're probably glad I wasn't here since I was into the quarantine thing. But I do have a request for information, Chairman, and
Yes, sir.
the superintendent may choose to address it today, or perhaps he might want to do it at a later time. But with your permission, I'd like to go ahead and address the superintendent with a particular question.
Yes, sir, that's fine.
Superintendent, I guess this is the time of year that I will remember that in the schools, we were starting to count heads and look to see how many kids we're going to have in school next year. Because in the schools, that's when we start looking at who we're going to be able to hire to make sure that we provide professional services to all of our students. And so I was curious about where we are with projections for next year, how that looked, if we're going to have more kids or less kids, because we all know that when the law requires us to make a budget, that that budget is predicated based on the enrollment in our schools. And so I was curious about that, where we're at with projections. And I was also curious to know if we're getting any information out of Tallahassee about what that budget looks like and how we're going to do business next year, because the truth is we can only provide services based upon the resources and dollars that we receive. And so, Superintendent, if you want to speak to that now or a later time, but I'd like to know about that.
No, absolutely. And I'll address a couple items, and I'll ask Mr. Horton to help me on the FTE side. I'll say a couple things. And then on the budget side, I'll ask Ms. Scallon to also help me. But I do want to start off by saying, first of all, very, very appropriate question, especially at this time of year. As you know, FTE projections, they drive everything for us. They drive our budget, the hiring, the decisions that we make. And as you also know, this school year is different. We have the vast majority of our students in the school building. We have another large percentage in my school online, and then we have some who likely went to Florida virtual or homeschool. And those who went to Florida virtual or homeschool, those are going to be those students that create a little bit of where are they? So it is important that when we are going through this FTE projection, we are conservative, but it's also important that you're not too conservative in terms of underfunding yourself, so to speak. But Mr. Horton will give a little bit of information on that one in 1 second. But it adds a dynamic this year. On the budget side, it's interesting, just as early as this morning, I was talking to the Florida Department of Education and saying, where are we on budget? Any thoughts? One of the statements was, it's a little early right now. The state's going through that process, but there are some articles out there that show that the state of Florida could be at a $2 billion shortfall, not for education, but across all agencies. So that's something that we do have to be mindful of. It was shared with me that the governor's budget should be out next week or the week after that. So I know Rita will be eager to look at that, but Rita will talk to you even more so about the other budgets that are to come, because it's not just one budget that, in essence, we create our school budget on. So we are being mindful in terms of looking at, what this budget might look like. We are in discussions of, Plan A or Plan B in terms of what the budget might look like for the upcoming year. But Mr. Horton, if you'd come forward first on the FTE projections, and then Ms. Gallen after that with the budget.
Yes, sir. Dr. White, you brought back memories for me of principals projecting their FTE and counting heads. And for the past several years, we've not done that to that level. So Wendy Meserve, our FTE person that does the projections for us, and we'll work with principals on an as-needed basis, but it's not something that we task them with. The FTE projection window has not opened yet at the state level, so she's not able to get in there and begin that process. It's a little late. It's later than it typically is. She checked as recently as this morning and was not given a tentative date for when that FTE window will open. And so just to give a picture of what happens is the FTE projection window opens, a window of time, and Ms. Meserve goes in and looks at what might be 7 or 8 models that project FTE for a school district, not just ours, but every school district. Those models are relatively tight together, maybe from bottom to top 400 FTE difference, which is essentially 400 students. But the state puts those models out for the districts to choose from. And so we technically are tied to one of those models. Now, that's an overall district FTE approach. What we do with individual schools within that district, we have the ability to increase, decrease. So the state provides those models for us. If we believe that we are significantly outside of those model projections, there's a process by which we would do that, but it's not typically something that is done. So we're waiting to see what those projections come to be. I think the state, at least Wendy's feeling, is that the state is kind of trying to get as much information as they can about this process before we go forward. So we don't have a timeline for when we'll be able to do that, which I think impacts Rita's ability to say, here's what our expected budget's going to be. But I would imagine it's coordinated at the state level so that the projection window coincides with budgets coming out from Tallahassee.
Well, in my imagination, I could think that might also affect HR in terms of employment and all those kinds of things regarding what we think we're going to have.
And what I'll always hang my hat on in that situation is historically we attrit maybe 200 instructors or maybe less. And so we'll be in a situation again this spring where we believe we'll see just normal attrition, retirement of instructors leaving, and then a very careful climb back up to employment that keeps in mind what the budget situation is and also expectations for enrollment. But I think that's always the cushion that we have. But you'd hate to go into a summer not hiring the good teachers that are out there and the good staff that's out there. So there's a balance there, but you're right, it is critical.
Or moving soon enough so that other districts don't hire them first.
Correct.
Well, because we know that the FTE rolls into that class size,
Right.
and that class size plays into our employees.
Mhm.
And you did do an excellent job last year, because I know we read about other districts that had to lay a large number of
Right.
employees off.
Yes, ma'am.
So I know how important it is to get that FTE. And our teachers are anxious. Is it not like April 15th or something, right around April, that we try to let our teachers know
Yep, and
where they
Dr.
stand?
Dr.
I
Harold
mean,
probably can give you that
trying to
date.
remember
Yeah.
that, but April will be here before we know it. And
Yep. But I think that is the point of the morning, is that the quality teachers that we want to hire this year are going to be snapped up in some cases by other school districts if we don't work appropriately. So I think last year, Mr. Chambers directed us to if we were going to lose 180 teachers to attrition, that we knew we'd need at least 50 of them. And so we went out and tried to hire the best we could find early on without necessarily saying, here's exactly what you're going to be doing. But and I know the HR side can speak to that, but that's part of the reason to help keep that impact down.
Well, I appreciate the information, and neither one of you knew this morning that I was going to ask that question, and the fact that you've already been in contact with the Department of Education tells me that you're on it, and very much appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
And maybe when you get some more updates, you guys can bring that into us, so
We'll do it.
we'll know what we're supposed to do with our part of the law.
Yes, sir.
And one sec, Mr. Horton. And one thing I want to highlight that Mr. Horton said is when you have 7 or 8 models in a normal year, if something's out of the norm, you would apply to the state to say, something's off, which is one I would imagine with FTE projections being late this year. I would assume that all districts all 67 districts across the state of Florida have the ability to be off this year just with the uncertainty of numbers. So it's good that it's not being rushed. I'm sure that there's been some things that are taken into account, and of course we're looking into it as well.
And at this point, if I were to guess, which is what our projections are, we were down a number of students this year, as many districts were in the state. I think the number I reported to you at one time was 850 students, K-12. If the question is asked, are we going to project that all those 850 students are going to come back next year? I think right now I would say we would project some return, but not all. So it'd be something less than that, I would imagine.
Good information. Thank you, Mr. Bryant. Thank you.
Ms. Gowan?
As Mr. Horton mentioned, the key to all of the budget process is the FTE. And so with that window not being opened and the FTE not being approved, then we haven't started the actual budget process for the schools. Now, I would surmise that within the next couple of weeks that will be accomplished because, of course, the governor's budget will be the first budget that comes out. That budget comes out and the school portion or the educational portion is based on FTE, so they'll have to have some projections. And then after the session starts, then towards the end of the session, you'll get the House budget, you'll get the Senate budget, you'll have the governor's budget, and the budget will then be some combination of those three. But we are watching, all of the information coming from the legislature and the sources that we do have to kind of keep a pulse on what we might be expecting as far as revenue. And there's some numbers out there, but it's a balance between, getting in a panic and hysteria and overreacting, but then being cautious and being prepared to react. So if we have less FTE, then we would have less teachers, and hopefully it would be handled the same way we have for many years, that it would not affect actual bodies because of the attrition that we normally have each year, as long as it's within those categories of teachers. So that would be our hope.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Gowan. Thank you, Superintendent.
Thank you. Some great information there. So
More to come.
more to come. You're correct. And Dr. Kelly, I will go to you next.
Thank you. Well, I just wanted to take just a minute to pause and extend my condolences to the Strong family. I know Patrick and his siblings represent some workforce in our district, some teachers, and Mr. Strong himself had the great privilege of working with Hayward Strong, Patrick's dad, when I was serving on the commission in Valparaiso. And I know that's a loss to that family, so I just wanted to let them know that we appreciated their dad and think of them in this loss. I wanted to say, with regard to the construction projects and those being on the website, that those remain the same. Those were the ones that were projected in our talk about the preeminent sales tax and that whole initiative. So the transparency line of alignment goes from predating that vote all the way to today. So, and I'm grateful to be able to say that we've kept our promises about that sales tax and those projects that are advertised there. And with regard to the FTE, I also wanted to be reminded of the fact that that goes for buses too. We do FTE on our school buses, and I'm grateful for the fact that with the information that buses can't come from capital, we are able to still find funds for new buses. So those parents who are advocates for new buses can recognize that those are still coming. Buses with seat belts and AC and the newest, latest, greatest safety features. So those are still coming. But I wanted to end with the fact, just to say, District 5 rocks. Remember, we had 3 of our principals and assistant principals of the year from District 5, and I know we have at least several of the candidates who are in the running for the Teacher of the Year from District 5, and I won't steal any of that thunder, but just to say I'm very grateful to represent District 5. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Ms. Vanchek.
Yes. I want to approach my time today a little bit different. I have something for board members. As everybody I've spoken before, I'm a former English teacher. And yesterday, our nation was introduced to a young poet named Amanda Gorman. She is the Youth Poet Laureate for the United States. I had never heard of her. And the reason I mainly bring her up is because when I heard a reporter speaking about her and read some more about her, she grew up in inner city Los Angeles, and she grew up with a disability, a learning disability. She has an auditory processing disorder, which led her to have a speech impediment her entire life. Now, this is the woman who stood in front of the entire nation yesterday. But what's so great about that is the reason she became a poet was that her teachers encouraged her to write out things because her speaking skills weren't good. She would write it out. But then she wanted to give that voice, so she credited those teachers for helping her find her vocal voice. And her mother is also a middle school teacher in Los Angeles. So she gave great praise to public education when she was in this interview. She just graduated from Harvard in the class of 2020. So already at 22, she has done great things, and she has 2 books coming out this year, one of poetry and one a children's book. But I just thought it was great that she was giving credit to education, and then to end up going through what she did and then being able to be chosen to do. I mean, we've had a lot of different established poets speak at these kinds of events, but she did give that, and that's why I'm pointing it out. But I've given you a copy of her poem, and I tell you, I've never wanted to be in the classroom more than when I got a copy of this. I mean, if I were there today, wow, what a lesson we could have. I'd be so excited. But she started with a rhetorical question that went, when day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find the light in this never-ending shade? And goes on, and in the end of it, she basically ends with, when the day comes, we step out of the shade of flame, and unafraid, the new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it. And as all of us who've worked with young people for many years, we know that the idealism and the optimism of youth always comes back around and sets us straight. So I just appreciate you allowing me to share that today. Thank you.
And Ms. Savanchik, not only as a former English teacher, but as a former speech teacher too, watching that young lady's stage presence
Oh, it was
really was
fabulous.
something else too.
Man, it just spoke
Not only
for
her
public
words, but her
education
deliverance.
throughout this country. It was great.
Thank you, Ms. Vanchek.
That's hard to follow, because that really touches my heart. Again, I listened to it, and I loved what you said about the teacher that, look, Amanda Gorman had the disability, but the teacher was able to look at her abilities and work around that.
Exactly.
And this is what the results of that. So,
Absolutely.
okay, that's going to be hard to follow.
No.
Mr. Chambers, you mentioned Catch the Wave earlier. And just a shout out to the individuals that participated in that document. I read through it, and there's some valuable information in there for our employees. Human resource, professional services, risk management, retirement, curriculum instruction, and again, the COVID update was embedded in there. And those departments that participated in this, it's really worth the time for our teachers to sit down and to to go through this. If you're close to drop, the Social Security, Medicare, definitely read that because it has a section in it about how to avoid some penalties, some cost to that. So nice job with this. How often will this, I know this is the first publication, and I'm not putting you on the spot for a monthly, but how often will this come out?
It will come out monthly.
It will come out monthly.
Yes, ma'am.
Great job. I mean, the departments, like I said, it's very informative, and I loved how concise everything was. And so definitely look at this. It has some very valuable information. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Right there.
And I would just like to just finish today by recognizing my colleagues on the school board here, because it is school board month, school board member month. And thank you, Mr. Chambers, for all the nice things that were said from principals. I'm sure there was a lot more that was said that was very positive, but it is an honor to serve with each of you, and for y'all to take the time out to recognize us today, that was that meant a lot. So, and you know, we serve not for us, we serve because we are a part of the Okaloosa County School District, and we really want what's best for the school district. And you know, so it is an honor to serve on this board and to serve with these wonderful people who I call friends and colleagues. So thank you very much, school board members.
Thank you, Mr. Bryant.
All right, so we'll move down to section 16, and this is the 2-minute version of public comment. And then we also do have public hearing on Monday night at 6:15. 17.1 will be public hearing for adoption of new school board policy 01-30, Title IX policy prohibiting sexual harassment. 17.2, public hearing for adoption of a new job description for risk management analyst. And we'll go around the room. Ms. Scallon, anything? Dr. Hale? Ms. Appleberg? Ms. Lightbourne? And Mr. Horton. Okay, this meeting's adjourned.